Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation on helping farm couples survive and thrive in difficult times. A special thank you to Northwest Minnesota Foundation for making this series of farm stress topics available. And just as a way of introducing myself, my name is Monica McConkey, and I grew up on a farm in northwestern Minnesota, where my parents and brother and nephew still run the family farm. And so I grew up really embedded in all that the farm was. I was active in 4-H and FFA and really learned the value of agriculture and living the lifestyle and the work ethic of an egg producer. So currently, I work in the mental health field and have for the last 25 years, and I am one of 2 rural mental health specialists in the state of Minnesota serving farmers and their families. And that is a legislative funded position through our farm business management program in the state. So today we're going to talk for about 30 minutes on how farm couples can really intentionally work to improve their relationship. There are some very unique stressors among farm couples and things they find themselves in a place of having to deal with. Oftentimes these stressors were not talked about or discussed prior to getting married, and as we all know, in marriage, things develop in life and sometimes sneak up on you. And often when each partner is running in their own direction with all of the tasks and duties that life brings, there's really a lack of connection and communication. So in these 30 minutes, we're just going to talk about different ways that we can reconnect with our partner and be moving forward together. So first of all, let's delve into some unique stressors that farm couples face. We know that farming comes with a multitude of unique stressors and hurdles to overcome. At the top of the list would be all of the uncertainties and uncontrollables that we deal with on a farm or a ranch. So things like weather, commodity markets, the global economy, tariffs, regulations, so many things that are outside of our control, but that often are what dictates success or failure in our business. So that's a huge stressor. We put that seed in the ground every spring, or we operate our livestock business or a dairy farm really on a lot of faith that what we're doing will pay off in the end, and the price will be there and the weather will be there. And sometimes it's not. And oftentimes it's not. And so how do we overcome those stressors? Time is another unique stressor for farm couples. And they often find themselves, if both husband and wife are working on the farm, they may be working together, kind of working towards the same goals to keep the farm operating, but they really don't see each other in a day. And if they see each other, it's in terms of working and getting tasks done. So there's not that time of intimacy or bonding. People are often exhausted from the amount of labor and the long hours. And so time is a huge factor in farm couple relationships, including time to get away. There's often when I talk to farm couples, one of the biggest complaints is we don't have time together. We don't have time alone together. We never get off the farm. So time is huge. Communication, I touched on that already. It's just being on the same page. And often when we're busy and plowing forward with all of the duties that we have in front of us, we miss those opportunities to communicate or to communicate effectively. Finances are tough on the farm. It is a lot to manage. It is, it's coming at you from a lot of different angles because you have the household finances, you have the farm finances, farm expenses. It's a lot to manage and it's a lot to talk about. And so, unless there's time set aside to really hash through finances, a lot of things can happen. And then there are a lot of questions as to, hey, why is our bank account where it is right now? I thought we were here and we're not here. And maybe it was a huge repair that needed to be done that took a chunk of money, but there wasn't that communication. So really important to talk through finances, both related to home and to the business, but a huge stressor. Multi-generational businesses. So when I work with farm couples, this is one of the primary stressors when they're in an operation or a business where there are parents or grandparents still involved. So there's some transition, some succession going on, which may or may not be communicated. So there's a lot of different levels of stress with multi-generational businesses, farming with your family. There's the personal family relationships. And then there's all those expectations, often unspoken, about how you are a partner in that business, the role that you each play in the business, workload, time off, not to mention the transition, the succession planning. That is often also not spoken about. So a lot of dynamics when it comes to farming with mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, and running that business effectively, but also how does that impact your marriage? And overall, we just need to kind of admit openly that the farm is really the unrecognized third partner in the marriage. That often the farm, most of the time, will come first over household, often over family, definitely over schedules. That when there's things to be done on the farm, if the weather's right, depending on the time of year, the season, that's where resources go, both financial, mental, emotional resources, time get poured into the farm. And often it feels like those same resources are not being poured into the family. So just a quick snapshot of some of the unique stressors for farm couples. So let's talk about how do we change that? How do we improve our marriage? And when you think about running your farm, think about the intentional investment that you make into your farm. So it's not like you just kind of get up one morning and say, oh, I guess I probably need to get the crop in today. And oh, I haven't bought seed yet. Oh, I don't have fertilizer, chemical. I suppose I should figure that out. That's not how it goes. There is very intentional investment and planning that goes into the farming operation, whether it's expansion, whether it's planning for the season, whether it's changing the type of commodity you're producing, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of thinking and mental and physical investment in your farm. So think about that. What are ways you invest in your farm? How does that look? So it's time, it's finances, it's emotional energy, it's planning, lots of ways you invest in your farm. So how do you know what needs to be done to improve the farm? When you're thinking about your operation, how do you know what needs to be done to improve it? So maybe you think about what's not running well, what's not efficient, what just seems to be a stressor that needs to be fixed so it flows better. So just think about that in your mind. How do you know what needs to be done to improve your farm? And then the third point, what happens if the farming operation has 1 or 2 bad years? How do you keep it going? So farmers know that there's going to be not so great along with the great, right? There's going to be great years, weather cooperates, prices cooperate, equipment cooperates, and then there's going to be years that, you know what, it feels like nothing can go right. Just give us a day where everything goes right and we'll be happy, right? So how do you get through and go on after some tough seasons or a tough day? Now I want you to look at these questions and I want you to swap out the word farm for the word marriage. So what are ways you invest in your marriage? How do you know what needs to be done to improve your marriage? And what happens if the marriage has 1 or 2 bad seasons? How do you keep things going? So we all know the investment that goes into the farm, even if one of you is a non-farming spouse. So you're working off the farm to really keep things going, to keep some cash flow, keep some consistency, maybe to provide health insurance. So there may be a bit of a separation from the farm, but the off-farm working spouse is still a key component in keeping the farm running. So how is that recognized? How is that appreciated? How is that part of the overall success of the farming operation? So really important to think about intentional investment. The farm would not continue without thought and investment and planning. And on the same hand, the marriage needs that much time, planning, energy to keep going and to be what you guys wanted it to be when you first got married, when you were planning to get married. So let's talk about how to make that intentional investment happen. First of all, communication is key. That is one of the first things we look at when I meet with a farm couple is how are you talking to each other? Or is there a lot of perception? Is there a lot of guesswork? Are you on the same page? Are you completely not on the same page? Can we get on the same page? Communication is huge. And we start working on communication really with active listening. And I do have a worksheet attached to this presentation that takes you through the steps of active listening. And what active listening really is being tuned in when the other person is talking. Some active listening steps include face-to-face contact or eye-to-eye contact. And that's not always the most effective because sometimes we have the best conversations and the deepest conversations with people when they are next to us. So driving in a car, working next to each other, sitting next to each other. Because sometimes, depending on the dynamics in the relationship, that eye-to-eye contact can be very intimidating for some people and may shut them down. So find out what works for you. How do you communicate the best? Are you sitting next to each other on the couch? Are you sitting next to each other in a tractor? Are you taking a walk together? Are you face-to-face? So it's however you can be the most tuned in to your partner. And then the big key is listening, but not listening to respond. So oftentimes when we are in a discussion or conversation with our partner, in our minds, we are already making our little mental list of how we're going to respond to what they're saying. We can't do that and listen at the same time. So we really need to be active in hearing what they're saying. And one way to do that is to tell yourself, when I'm listening to my partner, I'm going to have to reiterate everything they're saying. So I'm going to be very tuned in because I want to be able to to say back to them what they've said to me. And I can't do that if I'm keeping track of my list of responses mentally. So as your partner is talking to you about how they feel, or the issue they're having, or their questions about something, listen to them and then reiterate what they're saying, not word for word, but just paraphrasing. So for example, if one partner is saying, you know, I feel like we have no time together, just the two of us, we never get off the farm, we're never alone together, the kids are here, the parents are here, or what have you, and that's affecting our marriage. So the listening partner would then reiterate and say, I hear what you're saying. What you're saying is we always have people around us. We're always on the farm. We never get away together, and that's taking a toll. And then the partner number one can say, yes, that's exactly right, or no, that's not exactly what I meant. And so it's that back and forth, taking turns, active listening. Some couples even time it. They'll time, 3 minutes or 5 minutes each, and then it's the next partner's turn. So whatever works for you, the key is active listening, because that will help you get into that problem-solving phase. Part of good communication is learning your partner's and your love language. And you may have heard about the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. Really, really worth your while to check into that. We each have our own love language. So there are things that our partners do or don't do that really speak to our love language. So it can be things like gift giving or words of affirmation. It can be helping with projects. There are 5 love languages, and they're online. There are little quizzes or tests at no cost that you can take to find out your love language. And I'll tell you the importance of this. I'll give you an example. There was a couple who was not together a lot because of work commitments. And so in an attempt to show love and appreciation for his wife, the husband would purchase fairly expensive name brand purses and clothes and bring them home as gifts. Well, although it was appreciated, these gifts kind of went to the back of the closet, were never worn or used. They didn't hold a lot of meaning to the wife, and it was not at all her love language. So he's not understanding why she's not appreciating and feeling loved, because he's buying her all of these things. Where her love language is words of affirmation. It's saying, good job, I appreciate you, you're working so hard. It's recognizing the efforts. So there was a miss. There was a complete miss. Intentions were good, but it wasn't what the other person needed to hear. So I really encourage you all to jump online, take the 5 love languages quiz, identify your love language, and then have a conversation with each other about what feeds your soul, what tells you that you are loved, what's important to you. That is a key in improving our communication with our spouses, and in making sure that they are feeling our appreciation and our love. Let's move on and talk a little bit about deposits versus withdrawals in our relationship. We all understand this, right? Especially in farming, where often there are way more withdrawals than there are deposits. If we're talking about financial, also just sheer physical energy and work that sometimes we feel like we're coming up short. Well, the same is true in our marriage. If we find ourselves being kind of negative or condescending or crabby with our partner, those are all withdrawals from the emotion of the positive emotion of the relationship. And studies show it takes 5 positives to make up for 1 negative. So let me say that again. It takes 5 positives to make up for 1 negative. So if there are negative comments flying, where are the positives to back that up and to strengthen that relationship and your partner? So we have to be sure, again, going back to the intentional investing, that's the deposits we're making into the marriage to keep us strong and going in the right direction. And if those positives aren't there and it's the negatives, it's the crabbiness, it's the snapping at each other, how do we build up that account? How do we build up that marriage account, if you want to call it that, so that we have a good balance, we have some resiliency in our marriage to draw from. So again, it needs to be very, very intentional. Then let's talk about problem solving. This all ties back into communication. So many times we'll get into a discussion with our partner, and before we know it, emotions are flying and we are not getting anywhere. And that typically ends with one partner turning around and walking away, or one partner very upset and in tears, or both, right? There is no resolution that comes from a discussion that elevates to an emotional level. So if there's a problem on the table, whether it's relationship related, family related, farm related, off-farm employment, whatever the case is, there's a problem on the table. So the first step, and there is a worksheet attached to this presentation that will help you with this, but the first step is really identifying what is the problem. Let's make sure we're on the same page with the problem we're talking about. And then brainstorm solutions. And this is not a time to analyze if that's a good solution option. If it's not, just brainstorm and honor each other's ideas. Just put them down, whatever they may be. They might be crazy, they might be completely unrealistic. Just put them down. And in this process, it's really super important also to go back to that deposits versus withdrawals and make sure that there's not belittling or negativity about ideas that your spouse has, because you're on the same page here as far as wanting to move forward together. So put down your options, and then one by one, go through and list positives and negatives for each option. What this does, it may seem very scripted, but what it does is helps you in a problem-solving situation use problem-solving techniques like prioritizing and being rational in your thinking process versus it escalating into emotional fight. So following these steps helps you keep using that kind of thinking part of your brain versus the emotional part of your brain. So once you've gone through each of your options and listed positives and negatives, land on a solution. And this may not happen in one sitting. You may have to do some more information gathering. You may need to think about it, come back, and that's okay. That's okay. Agree on a time to do that. But it helps you really analyze all sides and it brings you together in that process. So these are just a few tips on intentional investment. There is also a handout on intentional investing in your marriage and just things to think about based on those questions that we asked earlier. And there's also a slide on active listening. What are the steps for active listening and how do you do that? How do you listen, not to respond, but to hear? And then, as I mentioned, there is also a worksheet attached on working through problem solving. And having that worksheet often helps you guide you in your discussion versus just trying to sit down and hash it out. So these are just a few tips on how to work on and improve your marriage as a farm couple. I also wanted to show some resources that are available to you in Minnesota and beyond. So the Department of Agriculture has a farm stress website, and this has a lot of great resources. If you do not live in Minnesota, check with your Department of Agriculture, because most of them, if not all of them, do have a piece of their website dedicated to farm stress. Another great resource that's not on here is your state's extension. So your university extension office for your state. They have also done really great work on farm stress, and many include work on farm couples and farm couple resources. So some others are there's some apps on here, Calm, Headspace, really great options for dealing with your own stressors, which of course do impact the marriage. The Upper Midwest Agricultural Safety and Health, UMASH, organization has a series of webinars that you can access online that are helpful as well. So these are just some options for you to carry on as a next step after this webinar and after this series of webinars, if you feel like you are interested in reaching out. And with that, I will also give my contact information. So do not hesitate to email, text, call if you're just stuck. And stuck is a good word, because many of the couples that I work with, that's exactly how they categorize where they are. They're just stuck. So I would be happy to point you in some helpful directions, maybe to talk through any of the worksheets attached or anything in this webinar that may have you may want more information on. So feel free to contact me at any time. And again, thank you to the Northwest Minnesota Foundation for putting this together, for seeing the need and the value in doing this webinar series for our farm families. So thank you so much. I am happy to be a part of this, and I hope this was helpful to you.